kitties. Greetings, kitties. Welcome back to my humble shack. I'm sure you're here for story time, so come on in, have a seat, sit right there around the table. We'll be ready for supper soon. You know, we all love our pets. I love them too. They're really good with hollandaise sauce. Oh, did I say that? It was just a joke. Anyway, we all love our pets, and we can get frantic when they get lost. We just never know what kind of soup they're getting into.
When I was about 13 years old, our dog ran away from home. This happened a few times, as the gate in the back was left open due to family members being careless and not ensuring that it closed all the way, and she got out. Usually not a big deal. The neighborhood we were in was a pretty okay neighborhood, and I could usually find her not that far away, sniffing at things, usually in the alleyways behind the houses, as that's where people set out their trash, etc., etc. She was just curious, and the minute she'd see me, she'd drop whatever she was after and come straight to me. We'd head home. No biggie. This one time it happened, though. I went looking for her and couldn't find her. I started to get a bad feeling and kept looking. Probably a good 6 blocks away, further than she'd ever roamed before, was an area with a bunch of townhomes/rental properties. She'd never gone that far before, and I was nearly in tears, ready to give up, go home to wait for her to hopefully find her way back this time instead, as I'd been out probably for almost an hour trying to get her at this point, walking around, when I saw some slight movement behind a wooden fence, and I thought I heard a yip. In this random person's backyard was my dog. She was muddy and wet, and they'd chained her to a post in the yard. She was pulling at the chain, barking, and trying to get to me. It was pretty far away, so I assumed that the people had decided to take her in, having seen her running around or something. I knew it was her because she was my dog, and I knew it was her. And also, she had her collar on. I will never forget what happened next. I rang the doorbell. An older dude opened the door after I rang the bell a second time, having given it a good 20 seconds and hearing people inside yelling and talking. "Yes," he said, looking at me through a crack in his door. "Hi, my name is Absolutely No Shame, and I'm here about my dog. I'm so happy you found her, and thank you for getting her off the streets." He looked at me suspiciously. "What dog?" he said, staring at me. "What?" "My dog, the little white dog you have in your backyard," I replied. I was starting to get really creeped out at this point. "We have no dog here," he said, tried to close the door on me. I stopped the door with my foot. "The dog in your backyard, right there." I was getting louder at this point, as I was starting to panic a little. I pointed towards his backyard, and my dog started to bark frantically. He looked in the direction I was pointing, looked back at me, sort of made a disappointed or annoyed grimace, and said, "Oh, that dog," rather unconvincingly. Then he left the doorway. I was totally mystified and more than a little frightened at this point. So I went back around to the yard and was ready to climb over the fence and just take my dog back myself when he came to the patio door of his yard, stepped into the yard with her. She cowered far, far away from him, I noticed, and unchained her from the post. then stepped over and opened his gate. She booked it to me and pretty much leaped into my arms as I kneeled down to meet her, and the old dude just wordlessly walked back inside with a scowl on his face. I have no idea what would have happened if I hadn't wandered out that far to find her, but he didn't seem to have any intentions of returning her or calling the pound or anything. Her collar had her license tag and information on it, as well as her owner's information on another tag, so his family could have dealt with it, but it didn't seem like they had any intention of doing so. I got the worst feeling from that guy. After that, if she ever got out of the yard again, she was never more than about 50 feet from the house or the fence. We even found her waiting patiently outside the gate to the backyard once.
Oh, I'm sure that they were just misrepresenting that neighbor. I'm sure the old man had no harm at all. I mean, the fact that he's Oriental has nothing to do with it. Surely he didn't mean to invite the dog to dinner. Anyway, while we're talking about pets, some people are dog lovers. Some people like cats. Some people like a lot of cats. Some people say that animals can see and sense the supernatural where humans can't. But sometimes you just wonder, what are they seeing?
My cousin Jay and his wife A had a bad stretch in their lives and had to move in with some relatives. Her uncles flipped houses professionally and had recently purchased some cheap property in an old suburb of Toronto. This one gives me chills because they are very reasonable, not superstitious people. I didn't believe it at first, but my cousin is a big, strong guy, heavy engine mechanic, and he seemed terrified after he told me this, so I don't know what to believe. It was a run-down piece of crap, but it had an extra bedroom and heating, so Jay and A moved in and lived on the ground floor with their 2 cats. Things were pretty normal for 4 months, until the uncles decided to rescue 2 more cats, bringing the total to 4. It was light at first. They'd hear weird noises at night sometimes, and things would go missing, jewelry and the like, but they'd pop up eventually. Jay is kinda absent-minded, so it's not unlike him to move stuff and forget about it. However, things started to escalate in the weird department shortly after the 2 new cats were brought in. The cats would gather in a semicircle and hiss at the door to the basement. One time, they started yowling so loud it woke people up, but they all scattered with Jay and A went to check it. The cats would do this at night regularly after a while, hissing and yowling at the basement door late at night. They thought maybe rats were in the basement, so the uncles called in an exterminator and they laid down some poison and traps. After the exterminator finished his work, he made a comment about keeping the cats out of the basement. But all 4 of them realized that, despite the door being open sometimes, they never recalled seeing the cats cross the basement threshold, let alone go down in the basement itself. Shortly after this, maybe after 6 months of living in the house, Jay and A had one final incident that made them move out of the house. A was downstairs doing the dishes, Jay upstairs, helping the uncles install some new shelves. She heard Jay walk, then break into a full run down the stairs toward the basement door. He then slammed the door behind her with such force that the noise made her drop a dish and break it. A yelled at Jay for being a lumbering buffoon and scaring her. Then about 20 seconds later, Jay came down to the same set of stairs and asked if A had fell down or something because her and the uncles had heard all the commotion downstairs. When A realized that Jay was upstairs the whole time, her blood ran ice cold. She then proceeded to tell Jay that someone had run down the stairs and slammed the door shut. The uncles and Jay went to check out the basement, but found no one was there. Anyway, they moved out maybe a week or two later. The uncles didn't last much longer. They sold the property to a development. Now there's a Tim Hortons / Wendy's / Subway built on the old site. A few years later, I was telling one of her co-workers at a new job about what happened. The girl she told asked where about the house was located. Apparently, the girl grew up in that suburb and the house was infamous. An old woman had lived there, alone with her cats for years. They found her dead one day in the basement. She had killed herself, and the cats had eaten parts of her. The kids used to dare each other to sneak a peek into the basement window.
Poor cats. I'm sure they were just hungry. Old can of tuna. Old woman on the basement floor. What's the difference? Can't be picky. Anyway, we all like to go to movie theaters. See the latest movie, latest hit. But have you ever wondered what happens in movie theaters when all the crowds are gone? All the popcorn is eaten, and the theater is empty.
During the summer, when I was home from college, I worked with a couple of friends as a morning cleaner at the local movie theater. It was fairly new, built in the early 90s, with 3 big screen rooms, 4 mid-sized screens, and 3 small screens. My job as morning cleaner was to clean all the screening rooms during a shift that went from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. It would take me about 20 minutes to get to work from where I lived. The theater was out in an area that was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Before the area was renovated, we were told it was part wetland, part farmland, and the rest owned by the local nature center. The first couple of weeks that I worked there, nothing out of the ordinary happened. Typically, there would only be 2 or 3 of us working a shift. There was a lot of time spent by yourself, cleaning and listening to your iPod. Occasionally, we'd meet up with the day shift in the morning and give them a breakdown of maintenance issues that we were dealing with and other things that they'd like us to look at. One day in particular, my manager asked me if we had noticed the front doors being unlocked when we arrived in the morning. When I said no, the manager went on to tell me that customers, primarily women, were complaining about a tall, lanky man in a suit that had been following them from the theater to theater, and sometimes into the bathroom. Several times women had come to the front desk frightened out of their minds, describing a 7-foot-tall man in a black suit, complete with a bowler cap, that walked slowly after them. A few times even the police were called. Teenagers that worked the day shift referred to him as the tall man. While he primarily targeted women, Occasionally, a male coworker would catch a glimpse of him, sneaking into a theater. On a couple of occasions, they would pursue them, thinking it was someone trying to sneak into a movie, only to find nobody there. We had 12 theater rooms total, but Theater 5 was the worst. Nobody wanted to clean out Theater 5. When I first started, I was fairly naive about ghosts and spirits, and I didn't understand why even my boss was apprehensive about Theater 5, kept assigning me to be the one to clean it out. What made Theater 5 unique was that it sat behind the bathrooms in the lobby. So to get to the seating area, you had to walk down a long hallway before reaching the screening room. Being that far back, you were the most secluded, especially when it's 4 a.m. and the only other people in the theater that you're with are on the other side of the building. People cleaning there would complain of nosebleeds, constant headaches, and a feeling of being watched. My first supernatural experience took place here. It was a normal morning. I had just finished sweeping out the lobby, and I was taking care of the cups and other garbage in Theater 5. By routine, you go through and throw away leftover cups and popcorn before vacuuming and sweeping the area. I had my iPod on, and as I was going through throwing cups away, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was behind me. I kept turning around, even at some points taking out my earphones and shouting, "Hello?" Of course, there was nobody there. Like I said, it was a normal morning and I had no reason to suspect anything. I went about my routine. About 20 minutes later, I'm at the top back row, sweeping out garbage from under the seats when I hear footsteps. Someone running. I look down, and at the front of the theater, I catch a glimpse of a little blonde-haired boy turning the corner into the long hallway as he ran out of the theater. Immediately, I threw down my broom and chased after him. I ran down the hallway and out into the lobby, but there was no kid. I walked further into the lobby and saw my boss through the front entrance on a smoke break. "Who was that kid?" I asked. My boss, Jeff, looked at me. For a moment he was confused, but then he laughed, and I'll never forget how casually he said it. "So, you met Charlie." Charlie was another thing customers constantly complained about. On several occasions, they claimed a little blonde-haired boy was running up and down the aisles in the theater, causing all kinds of noises and ruckus during the move. Of course, it was in Theater 5 when an usher would come to apprehend the child. He would already have disappeared. The female staff affectionately named him Charlie, after his resemblance to the character in Willy Wonka. Charlie was also responsible for knocking several cans of garbage over, throwing papers around, misplacing things, and generally making being a morning cleaner a real pain in the butt. Charlie was more of a nuisance than anything. We used to theorize that he was the son of the tall man, but the two were never seen together. My only encounter with the tall man came a couple of weeks after my run-in with Charlie. I had yet to hear about him at this point. Had I known, I most likely would have quit sooner rather than later. Usually in the morning, if you're the first to arrive, it's your job to walk up into the projector rooms and turn on the lights in all theaters. This is an easy task, except the top floor with the projectors has a lot of life-size cutouts of movie characters and massive posters, and in the dark, it can be a little creepy. I had done this several times before, and since I was the first to arrive, I go about turning all the lights on. The projector area itself is dark. Typically, we'd carry a flashlight with us while going around flipping switches. That morning, I couldn't find the flashlight. We'd later find it in the garbage. Probably Charlie's fault. So I walked through the dark hallway of projectors, flipping all the switches. I had stayed up all night prior watching the Andy Griffith Show. I remember because I was whistling the theme song to myself as I walked down the corridor. Once again, I got that feeling of being watched, and something, several yards away, in the area with the projectors, overlooking the IMAX theater rooms, was staring back at me. I stopped whistling and tried to focus my eyes. It was a cardboard cutout. They were everywhere, so I kind of dismissed it and was about to flip the next switch when the cutout moved. I froze. What I thought was a cutout was actually a figure hunched over. Quietly, it was whistling the Andy Griffith's theme song, imitating me, only doing it much more slowly. Slowly, it rose up from its crouch, revealing itself to be at least 7 feet tall. It was a man. All I could see was a silhouette against the red exit sign lights and some of the projector computer monitors. It started toward me, whistling quietly. I wanted to move, but for some reason my feet were cemented in the spot, and I had cotton for a tongue. I didn't know what to do. Slowly, the tall man stepped toward me. He walked with a bit of a waddle, as if he'd had a bit of a limp in his left leg. I couldn't actually tell. He'd taken about 3 or 4 steps toward me when something caught his attention, and he turned and walked into an office down the hall. I turned back and ran down the steps and waited outside the theater until my boss and the rest of the crew arrived. I told them what had happened, and they explained to me that the tall man existed, but he wasn't going to hurt me. I didn't care. That experience alone was enough to make me put in my 2 weeks' notice.
I'm sure there was never anything to be really afraid of. I mean, all it would have had to done is thrown some of that theater popcorn at the tall man. He would have ran screaming in fear at the high prices. Anyway, that's the last story for tonight, and gone again. Wonder why they keep running away. Anyway, that's it for tonight, kiddies. And remember, have very pleasant nightmares.